Hey all, it is Nikki. Welcome back to the channel where today I will be talking about some of the methods I've been using recently to take a mid-intensity plot and raise the stakes. So what was wrong with my original draft as far as stakes go? What wasn't wrong with my original draft? Well, for one thing, I didn't know my characters half as well as I know them now, which definitely changes the entire dynamic. And for another thing, I didn't know my world as well as I do now. I didn't know the rules of the world, what makes it tick, how it's supposed to look versus how it looks now, and all of those things sort of collected to create the one major issue, which is that despite all of my efforts to make the story feel like the stakes were really high, I was never really convinced. And if I, as the author, wasn't fully feeling the intensity that I wanted to get across, I could be pretty sure that the reader wouldn't get it either. Therein lies the problem. So to combat this issue, among other problems, I really had to rethink my plot and specifically my villains. And when I look back on what my process has been in raising the stakes for this draft, I could pick out 5 sort of key methods that I have consciously or unconsciously been using. They're not necessarily 5 of the best, but they're the ones that I've used as a launching off point. They are directness, hierarchy of villains, variety of conflict, scope, and personal aspect. So to start with directness, this is something that I've started thinking about fairly recently, definitely since I've started crafting plots of my own, and that is the more direct the route is between your big bad thing and your characters in the present, the more intensity the story is going to have and the more intensity the reader is going to feel. If your characters are only touched by the big bad thing by like a domino effect of like smaller problems trickling down to them, that can be okay temporarily, but in the long run, in order to get that intensity and that high stakes feeling you want, you need to give the big bad thing a direct route to your characters so that the problem becomes very real and very immediate. I say eventually because you can deliberately put that off in order to build tension. The Mistborn trilogy is a great example of that. The characters aren't face to face with the big bad thing until like the 3rd book in the trilogy, but the problems being created by that main villain were impacting them very directly, and eventually they do have that direct encounter with the villain that creates that huge feeling of intensity. As another example, let's talk about Lord of the Rings. Basic premise, if you don't know it, a group of adventurers set out on a quest to destroy an evil magic ring before the Dark Lord can use it to do something. And that is one of the problems with Lord of the Rings. It's never made explicitly clear what the evil ring actually does, what the bad guy is hoping to accomplish with it. Because of that, even though the problem is huge and very scary, it can also feel kind of ambiguous and distant because you're not really sure why you need to be so afraid of it. The author did use some clever methods in order to make the villain, even though he felt very far away, very close in some ways. In fact, he gave the villain a direct line of communication to some of the main characters, which made him feel very immediate. Another example of that would be Arwen, who is not one of the adventurers, and she is just supposed to hang back and wait while the questers go off and save the world. This would mean that the problem would be very, very distant for her. She's an elf, she'll be fine no matter what, so it doesn't really feel that immediate. But in the movies, they decided to switch that up and add a more direct line between the villain and her. They said, hey, surprise, now she's dying because her fate is now tied to the fate of the ring. Now, does this make logical sense for this one not that significant elf to have a direct tie to the fate of the ring? Not really, but look at what it accomplishes. When before she would have just been waiting at home in a beautiful dress, now she is in direct danger as a result of the villain. So we see that this subplot took something that was very distant, very far away, and brought it really close to home and made it a very immediate problem. In my own story, the main conflict revolves around a drought. People are dying because of this drought. The problem is droughts are kind of slow killers. Because of drought, The land starts to wither, it's producing less food. Over time, there's not enough to provide food for everybody, so there's a food shortage and people maybe start to starve to death because of that. But you can see my dilemma. It's a lot of middle steps and not really a very immediate problem, even though it is a problem. So to combat this, I decided to switch things up. I said that no, it's not a drought of normal rain. We have that. This is a drought of a very special substance, and because that is not falling, people are dying because of a rapidly spreading plague. So you can see that it's drought, people dying. Direct link. Eliminating some of that fluff in between, making the problem feel a lot more immediate. Oh boy, that was long-winded. Okay, number 2. Hierarchy of villains, or as I like to call it, the multi-tiered wedding cake of villainy. Because we know that the villain rarely works completely alone. There are usually underling villains that do the main villain's bidding, and often there can be an even bigger, badder villain behind that villain who is also pulling strings behind the scenes. In my initial draft, I only had one villain, and he was okay. He fulfilled all the requirements for a villain, but he never really caught on as a big bad villain that could create a high stakes plot. His motives and his backstory were all kind of small scale and didn't really produce the feeling of intensity and direness that I wanted. So did I scrap him? No, I did not. I said, bro, you keep doing your thing, keep up the small thinking, and threw in another villain who is actually pulling strings behind the scenes, controlling him, though he doesn't know it, and has far bigger plans with a far wider scope. And then, just for fun, because why not, there is now an even bigger, badder villain or dark force behind everything, orchestrating both of those villains without their knowing it. So, wedding cake of villainy equals higher stakes. Next up is a variety of conflicts. So how many problems do your characters have to deal with, and how do they raise the stakes in different ways? Some of them will be directly related to your big bad problem, the main overarching goal of saving the world or whatever huge thing your character is trying to accomplish, but some of them will just be problems that arise because life is complicated, and quests usually are more complicated than the average life. For example, my main character, Kyrian, is involved in a quest to save the world. That is problem number 1. But at the same time, he has a somewhat psychotic guide who is trying to kill him, which is a pretty immediate problem number 2 that he's also dealing with. Arguably, he's dealing with that more right now than he's dealing with the big bad problem. But then over here, character X is also being hunted by villain Y, and a whole war is going to break out between those two that will probably cross paths with another war that is also being fought somewhere else, and the effects of that are going to trickle down and affect Kyrian and his fellow questers over here. So you can see how everybody is dealing with multiple problems that are all different, and not every character is entirely completely focused on the main overarching problem. If that were the case, I feel like the story would feel a little bit one-dimensional. Life is never that simple. Things come up. We're all dealing with different things, and so all those different problems can connect to or sort of point to your big bad problem, and I think they often do, but variety of conflicts basically just makes things feel a little bit out of control and way more complex to build that high intensity you want. Number 4 is scope. I mentioned earlier that my main villain, why do I keep saying villain? I mentioned earlier that my main villain had somewhat small thinking, too small to create a super high stakes plot just around him. I mean, all he really wanted was like self-validation and vengeance against this one person. Adding those extra villains really helped me to take the conflict to fate of the world proportions and made the scope of the greater problem, the scope of the entire plot and the entire series feel a lot vaster than it would if that initial villain was the biggest, baddest thing my characters were going to face on their journey. Number 5, finally, make it personal. I talked about Arwen earlier. Not only did that help to make the conflict feel more direct and more immediate, but it was also a very personal, heart-wrenching blow to our hero Aragorn, and through Aragorn to us, the viewer. Let's look at the Lunar Chronicles. We discover very early in that story that there is a plague going on, and as the reader, you're kind of like, okay, plague, that stinks. It is only when the plague touches someone that is very close to a key character that it becomes personal and painful for that character, and through her, for us. And that way, a very small problem, relatively speaking, like the death or disappearance or sickness or suffering of one character, even a minor character, can be your most effective tool in skyrocketing that tension and making everything feel super intense and like the stakes are very high. Because the suffering of that character isn't just something that's objectively bad for the whole world, like drought. It's something that is personally devastatingly bad for your main character, and that emotional element can really help to raise the stakes. So those were the main methods that I use, both consciously and just sort of naturally, while I have been working on my current draft in progress. It's not an exhaustive list, but I hope it at least got you thinking about some possible methods, and if you have any methods that have really worked for you in building tension from draft to draft, feel free to drop them in the comments, share the wisdom. That's one of the things I love about the writer community, is that everybody just wants to help each other write better stories. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to like and subscribe / totally make my day. And as always, remember to spend some time in the clouds today.